is 6 a.m. on the East Coast. It is Monday, December 23rd. After we're 2 days away from Christmas, according to reports, this is Fox and Friends. Wow, the hard part's over. All right. Carley Shimkus is playing the role of Ainsley. Guy Benson is playing himself for the next 3 hours.
All right.
All right. And meanwhile, get started, Carley. Wow. And Newsweek is revealing America's top Christmas movies. Did my favorite make the list? Yes.
Fred Claus.
I keep my fingers crossed that Fred Claus made the cut. Fox and Friends starts now.
On this horrible story, Maddie.
Yeah, the details are certainly, and Brian.
All right, Maddie, thanks so much. Tone deaf, yeah, to say the least. I mean, you're sitting there touting the safety of the subways, and this is hours after someone was lit up on live because she nodded off on a subway train. Can you imagine? Is there a more horrific way to die?
It's almost too horrible.
Say this is bad timing for Governor Hochul to have put out this self-congratulatory tweet on subway safety. Yes, it's bad timing. It's also bad policy. That's why we're getting this problem. And it's been an issue now for years. I think Hochul very belatedly is catching up to the political reality. But the mess has already been made, and it's going to take a long time and quite possibly completely new leadership to change anything, because the current constellation of New York leadership has been a disgrace on this issue. We're just learning a few things about this suspect, including that he's in the country illegally, allegedly from Guatemala, with a criminal record.
Yeah, that's my sense. But the other thing to keep in mind, too, is that the cover of the New York Post, I'm watching local coverage just to see how local coverage is. They never bring up his legal status. And I also think that this all plays into the bigger picture of why you need massive deportation and begins with criminals.
Yeah, no, that's right. And Eric Adams, and he recognizes that. And that's why he sat down and spoke to Tom Homan and says, you got to get the criminal migrants out of the city. But his hands are tied, because not only is New York City a sanctuary city, it's also in a sanctuary state, which goes to the point of Kathy Hochul and policy change that she needs to take leadership under. I mentioned Tom Homan because yesterday he was in Arizona and he introduced Donald Trump, who was speaking at America Fest. And Donald Trump laid out his day one priorities, and you better believe the border control and getting criminal illegal immigrants out of this country is among them.
Start with. And there's also over 1 million people in this country illegally with active deportation orders already against them. Right, so you put that group together, we're talking about millions of people. And if you want to look at the polling, Brian and Carly, through the years, these deportation ideas have been unpopular until very recently. And I think the reason is the type of story that we led with. In the subways of New York, people say, get that type of person who has no right to be here, harming our folks, out of the country. And now it's majority supported. People are sick of this.
And you better believe that a majority of these people are in sanctuary cities and states for obvious reasons. And the Wall Street Journal has an interesting piece that was just released. The editorial board asks, are Democrats in sanctuary states trying to attract? So one of the things that they bring up is the census. And illegal immigrants are counted in the census. So if you have migrants moving into the country, then the representation stays or increases. If more migrants move in, then people are moving out. I think it's a fair question to ask.
They want those residents to count for their numbers. And by the way, the stats that we just put up on the screen there, that's what we know, right? Because a lot of these people are living in the shadows. So they're very specific looking numbers, but I guarantee you those stats undercount the actual influx of illegal immigrants, especially into places like California.
And just by the way, they follow our news, illegal immigrants, potential illegal immigrants, coyotes, better than we do, right? They have great. How many moves to the border are not happening now because they know who's president, who's coming in? So how many people are going to go, it's not worth it to sacrifice my house and my family to get those $25,000 to give to somebody who's going to bring me to the border and then get me through and find those holes in the border.
Strong messaging might already be helping the situation.
Guy, the reason why more people are into mass deportation now, I think, is because they know you don't turn off the Hispanic audience and the potential Hispanic voters just because you're cracking down on the border. It was conventional wisdom. You cracked down on the border, wrong message to Hispanics. And now they're saying, no, right message. I came here the right way, and don't lump me in with people trying to break the law.
And criminals, right? They're like, we want the criminals gone.
Yeah.
Who doesn't want the criminals gone?
Well, you mentioned messaging, Brian, and yesterday, Senator John Fetterman, he sat down with ABC on their Sunday show, and he said something really interesting. The question was interesting, and so was his answer, having to do with why Kamala Harris lost the election and why Donald Trump won. Listen to this.
Well, he's like, no, I'm not going to make that same mistake because I want to win next time I'm out there.
So true.
A couple of things. He's a politician, but I don't know, did he put on his good gym shorts for that interview? This guy is, he thought, there's going to be, we're going to have a problem. And he said, I saw the crowds, and he saw the assassination attempt.
And I just like both things that John Fetterman said there. He didn't bring Kamala Harris down. He said, he brought Donald Trump up and said he's a singular political talent. For somebody to get shot in the ear and have the political mindset, and I just think the natural reaction to get up and say fight, 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 and to continuously have the same message when it comes to the border and the economy, despite all the people criticizing him and calling him a fascist and saying, no, this is right. And I'm speaking for people who don't have a voice. To do that for 8 years and for it to pay off is exactly why John Fetterman said that. And he says he's rooting for the guy. Yeah,
and Politico had a story, though, just to show you that he's also apolitical on the Democratic side. This guy, Matt Steyer, president and CEO of the North Nonpartisan Nonprofit Partnership for Public Service, in Politico says, whatever you do, Democrats, don't leave your civil service job. We need you in there fighting against the Trump agenda. And we saw Hakeem Jeffries, don't overreact. Don't go crazy on every single Trump tweet because we're going to be in this for the long fight. So he says, and I'm also not going to go to bat for Speaker Johnson. So there's going to be a lot of resistance while they still fight, while they try to find their political footing.
But it's just interesting to see Hakeem Jeffries. I saw him giving some talking point about the government shutdown that was averted, and he was still using this talking point, the extreme MAGA Republicans. I'm like, they won.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not sure if that's working, and it stands in stark contrast to John Fetterman, who's obviously blazing a very different path in terms of how he's going to approach the incoming administration.
And really quickly, Joe Manchin, during his interview yesterday, we're going to be talking about it later in the show, but he said one of the reasons Democrats lost is because they tried to make the extreme mainstream, and that's his perspective. And he's saying to the Democrat Party, you need to ask yourself as a whole why you lost people like me.
I would say, too, I was in the box I had a chance to talk to the president last weekend. You know who was there?
Joe Manchin.
Joe Manchin.
He talked about that, too. He said, I wasn't invited, but I also wasn't kicked out.
Yeah. So he goes, I want to see how I can help.
He invited himself.
Right.
And they didn't, and then they let him stay.
I wish they could find something for him because he does like to get things done. He was a governor, and he does understand what people
We'll see. He's on his way out of the Senate. So there's so much to break down and talk about. We're here all morning, and let's turn now to your headlines. Are your headlines?
That's why. That's why Donald Trump's speech, you had to have watched it. Some of the lines you remember, other things like, by the way, I want an Iron Dome for the country, I want Greenland for the country, and I think we'll take back the Panama Canal. Teddy Roosevelt would have loved it that way, would have wanted it that way, never would have given it away. Thanks, Jimmy Carter. But I digress. What is tomorrow?
Christmas Eve.
And what's the next day?
Christmas Day.
In between, a lot of people will be watching what, Carly?
Movies.
Yes.
And we have a list of Americans' favorite Christmas movies of all time. And list or not, Home Alone comes in at number 1.
5. I think they're all good. I would flip number 5 with number 1. It's a Wonderful Life. Todd outed you for having never seen Christmas Vacation.
I've never
this is
seen
on
it.
your. Can I assign that to you as homework?
I know. I'm missing a lot of cultural references there. And also, it's unfortunate, Brian, that your favorite movie, Fred Claus, didn't make the list.
I feel bad for the list.
Well, but you know what?
Because it belongs on the list.
You can watch a little bit of it right
now.
now.
Can we just see a clip?
To you.
Yes, please.
Vince Vaughn stole the show and overwhelmed Santa in one of the few Christmas movies that actually gives credit to the siblings of the famous people, like in this case, Santa. Here's a look at what I believe will eventually be, like, It Was a Wonderful Life, by the way, was not popular when it first came out.
Fred Claus is not going to be
Fred Claus, it will eventually be number 1 in the next generation of Fox and Friends hosts.
It will not.
Watch. And he's the younger brother.
I didn't know that's what Fred Claus was
No,
about.
he's the older brother. No, Vince Vaughn is older, and then Santa comes in and steals the spotlight.
So it's about siblings. Fred Claus is Santa's brother.
Yeah.
I love Vince
That's a
Vaughn.
creative
I love
idea.
Vince Vaughn.
When you watch it, this is what happens. When you watch it, I get text messages like, you know what, you're right. This is what happens. Like, Brian, I watched it. It was
Many
really
people
good.
are saying.
Right. Many,
Right.
Some would say. All right. So, what is your favorite Christmas movie? Is it on the list? Is it on the list? Friends at FoxNews.com. All right. Meanwhile, more Fox and Friends in a moment. Tom Homan stands.
1,000 people a year waiting for regular kidneys. Only.
And we also mentioned that 800,000 number of people with end-stage kidney disease. So what does this successful transplantation mean for people who are on that list?
It's amazing, but it means that they have to make further and further progress for immunotherapy genetically. 10 alterations for this one.
Wow.
And then Dr. Montgomery, who's also an immunologist.
Patient who donated her own kidney to her mother and then ended up needing one, to Dr. Montgomery, who is a heart transplant recipient and dedicated his life to this. I mentioned heart transplants. Does something like this, I know it's a pig kidney, but does the advancement of this mean that it could translate to other implantations?
Absolutely, and they've
Wonderful story. And Tawana, the patient, is going to have a very happy Christmas. God bless her.
And she
counting down till Christmas from December 1st, and you're like, oh, it's finally happening.
I remember one year I was convinced my family was off and that Christmas Eve was actually Christmas Day. I was one day off. And I said, if we do not decorate this tree, this whole holiday is going to be blown.
Wait, what do you mean? You thought that
I was
Christmas
convinced,
was on December 24th?
and I was certain that everyone had it wrong.
Like the calendar?
Right, on the calendar.
Aw, how
Yeah.
old were you?
I was 20. No, I
college.
think I was about in second or third
So
grade.
you've always had strong opinions,
Oh,
and you've always tried to
Right. And
prove your point.
And I've always been wrong.
Strong but wrong.
That's
Strong but
true.
wrong.
Right. Well, more on that later as the show progresses. But I was amazed when the president's speaking a lot when he was on the campaign trail, what do you do? And it drives people crazy, but they just say, new audience, I got to give the same message every single time. And sometimes you carry the message and you go, wow, it's the same speech. Since the president won, he's putting new things into all his remarks, whether it's the Patriot Awards or what we saw yesterday in front of Charlie Kirk's group.
Yeah.
I think part of it is like when you're running.
So those are some of the things I was talking about. So he's talking about an Iron Dome for the country. I want Greenland from Denmark. And by the way, I want the Panama Canal. So I asked the brain room about the Panama Canal. They said there's no proof that China owns any portion of it. We use 72% of all traffic is American. And the prices did go up 15%, nearly $5 billion over the last year. But they say it's because of low water levels, and they have to slow down the amount of traffic that goes through. But you know what? Rattle their cage. Make them justify it.
Yeah.
And let's see if we can get those prices down. After all, we are a frequent customer.
I do think part of this, though, is national security. You think of Greenland, for example. The Arctic is a major, I think, battle area for the future in terms of who controls the Arctic. And I think the same applies to the Panama Canal. China may not control it, but they, my understanding is, have some very strategic interests in that area. So part of this, I think, is Trump starting a negotiation with, we want the whole thing back. And then the Panamanians might say, well, hang on, no, but let's have this conversation. Trump just announced yesterday his ambassador to Denmark, which owns Greenland. Can you imagine having that job now or being the ambassador to Panama? You're going to have a busy opening few weeks here.
I think it's one of the PayPal mafia. It's Ken Howry.
Denmark, which, I mean, Greenland is a sovereign nation, but under the Kingdom of Denmark's authority, I guess.
Sovereignty, they're within that
kingdom.
kingdom.
It's an autonomous nation.
Yes.
Anyway, Donald Trump was mocked for saying it, but he clearly has a plan for why he wants to control Greenland or take it under the United States' umbrella. And one of the things I'm just pure speculation here, is he is talking a lot about how to get criminal illegal immigrants out of our country. And if countries like Venezuela that we don't have relations with won't take them back, maybe he'll build a facility in Greenland and ship them there. That would for sure be a deterrent for people to come to the country if they know that they're going to Greenland.
Very cold.
Yeah.
Yeah, put it this way. I think my prediction, we get it.
Like, get it?
I think we get Greenland. My prediction,
It's huge.
What's today? To December 23rd.
Yeah.
December 23rd, 2024, I believe by the end of his term, we'll get Greenland.
Okay, so
because he loves real estate.
Yeah. Mark it down.
Right, and we'll see. And I'll tell you why.
699 people. And that's because 75% of it is covered in a sheet of ice. And the capital city is Nuuk.
Really?
Yeah.
I would never have picked Nuuk.
N-U-U-K, right?
That's right.
Right. So Iceland's nicer than Greenland. And the Vikings are responsible. Is that
Iceland
correct?
is greener than Greenland.
Which
and
is weird.
Greenland is icier than Iceland.
The way I learned it, and a lot of times things don't come out correct, but I remember people told me that the Vikings looking to throw off visitors would name Iceland so no one would come, it's nice, and they named Greenland.
I think that's probably true.
Like
Can
like
you
a
find out,
psychological
can you ask
thing.
Fran Tarkington of the Vikings or somebody?
Get the brain room.
Alan
Brain
Page?
room.
Where's Leif Erikson when you need him?
I know. Or at least, yeah.
I know.
I would say
I
Bud
bet you
Cook.
there's truth to that. I remember learning that in school.
Right? Those are the types of things that you expect on a news network. I bet you there's some truth to that. Carly definitely trying to back me.
My speculation on why Trump wants Greenland could be totally off.
Right.
No,
By the way.
as soon as you start saying, like, this might not come out right, but I'm just like holding on to the couch. What's going to
I
happen?
should save that for radio.
All right, so we've got a lot to cover here this morning, starting with this Fox News alert.
On a subway in Queens, they were slashed, and one of them died. The 26-year-old survived, but a 36-year-old man died yesterday as well.
But again, you need the public to help Guy, right? You have 3 high school age guys who spot this. They tell him. They shut the train down.
Of course, he's hanging out in New York, a sanctuary jurisdiction. And, you know, Kathy Hochul was out there quoting the Statue of Liberty poem and all this stuff, justifying these brutal policies for years. Now she has this brutal tweet. I mean, this goes right back to her doorstep and other so-called leaders in this state.
Yeah. And here's Tom Homan, incoming border czar, on all of this. Watch.
More momentum. That's why 54% of the American people want mass deportation. That's what Tom Homan should keep in mind. Throw it out there. All the people that have been victims of these crimes. I watched Rachel Marin's mom yesterday with President Trump, and he said what a great. He looked me in the eye, and I knew I was very quiet when I first met him. I wanted to make sure it wasn't for politics, but I could see how he looked at me like a father and a grandfather. Wow. I feel like Tom Homan's acting the same way.
Yeah, he's doing on January 20th. The border is going to be a much different situation.
Well, think about the upgrade at border czar. From Kamala Harris to Tom Homan, someone who doesn't care at all or worse, to someone who cares in his bones and has for years and is going to be on this mission with a purpose.
Absolutely. All right, 15 minutes after the hour, let's talk about Democrats. And basically, they're trying to recalibrate, find out who their leader is, what their mission is, and what went wrong. So they sat down with 3 focus groups, and they came up with some interesting conclusions.
Yeah, that's right. So Politico has a headline saying, that is so funny, and something like that is going to stick. And you're hearing it from inside the Democratic Party as well as outside. But there is clear frustration. Wall Street Journal also has another article about how this is a moment of chaos, obviously, for the Democrat Party because they don't have a message or a clear messenger. I mean, who's going to take the helm? Who's going to be the next leader of the Democrat Party? Maybe Hakeem Jeffries, but if so, he certainly needs to increase his name recognition.
Well, I think we're going to see something of a civil war within the party over these next couple of years because you have Democrats who are a little bit more pragmatic, at least want to win elections, seeing all this and saying, we got to cool it on some of this crazy identity stuff, some of the gender politics. We've gone way too far out on the left, but there is an entrenched, powerful, loud activist class that's like the beating heart of that party, and they're not going to just sit there and take it, right? They're going to fight on this stuff.
You know, I love what you said in the first hour, too, about the word MAGA. The MAGA, you try to label it as a negative situation, but people don't look at it that way. You drive down, you drive through Pennsylvania, Fetterman referenced it. I have them all over Long Island. There's Trump stores that say MAGA. So you're trying to disparage people by giving them a label that they embrace. Yeah. So maybe you want to think twice. They say there's 3 things. Some Democrats blame Biden. others blame inflation, and others blame a losing hold of culture. And I'll do something else. The subtitle of all this is every single one of the people that covered for Joe Biden, who was barely in office, who was a shell of what he was and what people thought when they elected him. He wasn't doing anything. The cataclysmic decisions, the brushback, pushback, and blasting of anyone that said, why does Joe Biden not speak to anyone? Why doesn't he confer with anybody in the Senate or the House, or even give interviews with friendly outlets for 4 years? He wasn't there. So that's the problem. He wasn't a bad leader. He was a bad leader. 34% approval rating right now. At least the American people think so. He was a non-leader.
No cabinet meetings. They hired a speech coach.
9 in 4
They were trying
years.
to cover.
Just missing.
They were trying to cover for him the whole time.
And the other thing is, when we, on this network and elsewhere, just noticed things with our eyes and ears and observed the president doing
shuffle,
things.
the vacant stare.
All of it, we would point it out. And then the White House came out and said it's a cheap fake.
Yeah.
We're the liars. And then that whole thing blew up on the debate stage June 27th. And I think a lot of voters who weren't really sure about how to react to all this, once that whole thing fell apart in front of their eyes, 70 million people tuned in for that, they're like, oh, so they were lying aggressively to us, obviously. Maybe the cheap fakers have a point, right? And the rest is history.
That's right. I mean, I remember when it was reported and true that when he was walking from the White House to the plane to Air Force One, they were going to encircle him with people to try and protect him, and then he would go up the small set of stairs. By the way, before we get to headlines, you said that you liked something that Guy Benson said in the 6 o'clock hour. Did you like anything that? Did you like anything that I said?
Give me a second.
All right, I'm going to read this. I'll give you some time.
No, I liked everything that you
that's
said.
Good
Thank you
save.
so much.
Right.
Good stuff.
That's the only thing I liked of what Guy said.
No, I didn't mean that.
Really?
I didn't want that to happen. All right, we got some more news to get to happening today. What a wonderful message, and amazing that he became a minister this
Especially at
weekend
Christmas,
here in New
right?
York
It's
City.
like beautiful. I'm right there with you, and just sending that message to the people of this country right around Christmas, I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, and he
great.
said that you can't talk about religion in Hollywood, and I think he brings up a good point, which is why there have been really successful religious movies that have been made by smaller studios. I mean, we have Fox Nation The Saints, which is very well done and has been hugely successful. And then the other movies.
The Christmas pageant, right? There's a new one that
about
apparently is
Jesus'
really good.
life, and the Hallow app that Mark Wahlberg supports. So there are people in Hollywood, many people in Hollywood, who believe in God.
I think the whole...
They're showing it more now.
Carly, I think the whole feeling that the religious movies are niche is over because people are desperate to find a winning genre. And the Marvel thing is even running out of juice. But you know what is not is those morally themed movies, many of which... the #1 Christmas movie in the country right now is this guy who produced The Chosen.
Yeah.
So I do think things are changing. If for no other reason, forget about religion. It's working. So people are going to the movies, and Hollywood, if they are in the business, if they want to stay in the business some way, shape, or form, they'll embrace it.
It's a good change.
Totally, if not for any other reason than money, right?
I'm just saying.
Profits, right?
I don't want to be too
and
cynical.
other good reasons.
All right, another reason to let, by the way, he does great work for the Boys and Girls Club. He said saved him as a kid. Meanwhile, straight ahead, West Virginia.
But I would imagine if you are a loved one of any of the other 37, you're like, well, okay, you made these 3 exceptions for stories people have heard about. What about our justice?
Yeah.
What about our kid? And look, I'm actually against the death penalty in cases where there's any ambiguity about guilt whatsoever. But some of these people, absolute stone-cold killers, proven beyond any doubt. And Joe Biden comes in the final days of his presidency and waves this wand. And I think we're going to hear from some of these families very, very unhappy about this.
I mean, if you were shocked by the 1,500 that he commuted the sentences, this should shock you to the core. So these people are going from being on death row to serving life in prison, which means that they're waking up happy today. And can you imagine being the mother of those 2 little girls who were murdered and hear that the Biden administration is going to give the killer of your children a win? And the thinking behind the scenes, they were the worst killers so that they can't do that. You're going to look at a mother and say that the man that killed her 2 daughters is not among the worst. How do you judge that? How do you have the moral compass to do that?
You just got to wonder if he's doing any of this. So 37 of 40 are going to get, 37 of 40 will get life instead of death. And why would he do this? Well, he's going to go visit the Pope. And the Pope is against the death penalty.
Yeah.
And maybe he's trying to expunge, have one thing, because he's also campaigned on the fact how much he loves abortion. So as a Catholic,
Yes.
you're going to go see the Pope. It's like, hey, yeah, I'm pro-abortion, but on the good side is I'm going to save some of the death penalty.
Yeah, and
so I'll let the
killers,
let the fetus die, but I'll let the murderers live.
That is so true. And you know what? I do sympathize with people who are against the death penalty. But what Joe Biden should have done, if he wanted to leave his mark on this, is something that he didn't do. The Wall Street Journal says the administration didn't give priority to bills to end federal capital punishment when he was in office, didn't follow through on his campaign pledge to call on states to eliminate the death penalty. If he wanted to make this a priority during his administration, that's what he should have done. Not at the 11th hour commute these sentences and rob people of the justice that they thought they had.
Well, and the other thing is, Carly, he's presenting this in the statement that was written for him, right? The administration is presenting this as a principled stance against the death penalty. Is like, we're against capital punishment. We're not going to let the next guy come in and carry out these executions when we had a moratorium. Okay, if you're so principled, why the exceptions, right? Principles don't have exceptions.
Political blowback.
Politics. It's all about politics. So if you're one of the 37 other families, sorry, your politics didn't matter as much than those three, which they flagged for political reasons, which is very different than a principled stand.
I hear you. Meanwhile, that's not the only brutal death that we're talking about.
Ugh, at Christmas time, too.
Insane. Thanks so much. Appreciate you feel about when you see this thing happening. I said to myself, is this an old story? Is this actually new? And then the cover of the New York Post today shows, and they did the investigation, and we got confirmation that you have a illegal immigrant on a train, sees a woman, and decided while she's nodding off.
And
he sat there and he watched it.
And we saw it in the red circle. He was just sitting there, remaining at the crime scene and watching what he did unfold. And one of the transit chiefs of police talked about what the first responders, the law enforcement, are going through today, because they saw what happened to this woman.
They hit her with fire extinguisher right away.
I mean, she died, so what they witnessed is going to be an image in their minds forever. It's just horrible. And he shouldn't have been in this country in the first place.
That's it, right? That's the key thing. You can talk about these horrible stories, and unfortunately there's a parade of them, without saying, oh, all immigrants, all illegal immigrants are dangerously violent. That's obviously not true. But every time an illegal immigrant commits a violent crime against an American, there's an extra level of righteous outrage, because that person should have had no opportunity to be here to victimize anyone in the first place. And that's why I think we talked about it earlier in the show, Brian, when you see rising public polling in support of not just deportations of criminals, which is through the roof in terms of the polling, just broader mass deportations, I think a lot of people have reached the end of their rope with this type of story.
Right, and especially because criminals are going to be first. And it's going to take about a year and a half to get the bulk of the criminals out, like this guy, and you're going to grab him. And for one thing, he had a violation in Arizona, at least one. My sense is just when you have a criminal could do something this horrific, there's something in between that violation in Arizona and here, and maybe it happened in Guatemala. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Here's Tom Homan.
You need leaders.
Yeah, and I think they're trying to sort of recalibrate here on the whole resistance thing, because you have some Democrats who are going to go all in on resistance again, right? And we'll see that. And the opposition party opposes by definition. But guys like John Fetterman, we've seen clips of him talking about wanting to work with the president where possible, to work to root for the success of the country under the Trump administration. You're going to see different Democrats, I think, maybe approaching this Trump term, at least to start, a little differently than we saw circa 2017.
Yeah, and so Joe Manchin, he was a Democrat senator for over a decade before he became an independent, and then he decided to leave the Senate. Jim Justice.
Rebuilding a brand that is durable and reaches people. And so when you look at domestic policy, they're about spending and fighting Trump. When you look at foreign policy, please tell me that don't tell me that you thought they had a good foreign policy. China got more expansive in the South China Sea. The Middle East is in total chaos. The reason there's a light at the end of the tunnel is because Israel is able to buck this administration with Hezbollah, Hamas, and Iran, allowing the overthrow of Assad, which was kept in power by Iran and Hezbollah, who this administration went out of their way to bolster Iran, pay for the hostages to come out, try to get back into this nuclear agreement.
Yeah, well, it's a new day, and people are hopeful now.
Yep.
Soon,
Very
watching.
soon.
All right, we have some more headlines to get to, starting with the Fox. Okay, so
That was
have
you.
an ally.
Right?
That was you posing
not
as
me.
Angie,
I swear
wasn't
It's
it?
not me. I'm telling you, it's so underappreciated. It brings humor to Santa and brings a human side to Santa. Because you think about Santa just being like a one-man operation, you don't think of his family.
That's right. We hear of Mrs. Claus a lot, so his wife is represented.
Right. You mean Santa's Claus? Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fact that she was willing to accept him as he put on weight, because he was not born a heavy-set child.
Are you sure?
He put on weight later in life.
Is that a part of Fred Claus, or is that a part of like just the history of
a little bit
Santa?
what I know,
Got
and
it.
a little bit what Fred Claus
Inside
taught me.
info.
Yeah.
Our sources.
This weekend, my husband and I, well, my husband read "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" to Brock for the first time. Classic instant memory for me.
Right.
It was so cute, and he kept on looking at the reindeer and calling them dogs. He's like, "Doggy?" We're like, "Okay, we get an animal.
Ballpark.
We got 4 legs. We're at the same size."
But we have to get this kid to a zoo. Right? I mean, quickly. Or he could come to our studio.
Oh, that's
Yeah, we had
right.
a caribou here or something, didn't we?
Yeah, thanks to Bass Pro Shop.
Do you want to bring that home at the end of the
season?
season and just put it in your house?
Do you know what? If I dragged that reindeer, that caribou, down the streets of New York, I bet you that people would be like, and that's not even the strangest thing.
I don't think so, yeah. I saw a guy walking a llama, and no one was, the only thing is, it was before they had that whole
a true
bike lane.
story?
Yeah, it was before they had that bike lane. He was just sitting there like this, walking across. No one was even looking at him.
That was Ducey, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't. I just thought it was strange. I wish I had some witnesses.
By the way, just for the record, I offered a kind suggestion, i.e. a signed Carly. She's never seen Christmas Vacation.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Must see. Must see.
We'll see. I'll get to it.
Yeah, when Chevy Chase
I do,
was
I'll let
funny.
you know.
Those were the days.
That time.
All right, meanwhile.
I raise a hallelujah. I will watch the darkness flee.
If that's true, you just heard me, folks. Come on back. We need you. We love you.
I think needs to resonate with the faithful, with Christians, saying it's great for you to come to church, but you can reach out to people, especially this time of year, and say, hey, why don't you come with me? It sounds like a lot of people are almost thirsting for that invitation.
Yes, and Catholics aren't too good on that, guy. Christmas to you, too. But we're launching a new thing, one-on-one, in that we're asking each of our people to invite somebody else to come. Because a lot of them say, well, guess what? I find that the other challenge we got is, we say, Carly, like yesterday we were jammed, and we love coming, and we love. I said, well, we do it every Sunday. Come on back. You know what? This beats Victoria's Secret anyway.
You bring up a good point. A lot of times when you go to church on a holiday, a lot of priests are like passive aggressive, like, where the hell have you been?
Oh, yeah, that doesn't work. That backfires, right? It's like the parents crabbing that the kids bring their laundry home. No, that backfires. So we say, hey, glad you're here. We're delighted to have you. We're better off with you here. Hope you enjoyed it. And they'll shake their eyes. I said, well, then.
Especially if they have a buddy. Sometimes I'm Roman Catholic, and there is a way of doing it. You stand at a certain time, you sit at a certain time.
Yes.
Sometimes people are a little nervous about that. So
Yes.
if you have somebody to guide you.
Yeah, show you when to put in the collection basket and everything. That is very,
That's an important part, too. Okay.
So, Cardinal, tell me about this. This could be encouraging, yet must be bewildering. You have things like The Chosen is a huge hit. You have these religious-themed shows that are even getting Hollywood's attention. So there's promise out there.
You're
people looking for
saints,
religion,
the
right?
saints here on Fox.
Exactly.
Great,
So these things happening, there's a reason Martin Scorsese does it, and he produces it motivated by it. So it shows you there's a thirst for religion, but yet if attendance is down at church, how do you solve that?
You wonder, because now they tell us.
Potentially, it's kind of this cliche, maybe a little corny, Jesus is the reason for the season, but it's literally true.
It is literally
Remind us of the good news.
Yeah. In fact, I thought, bingo, there it is. Everybody, look, we're all united. Bring it on.
I think that archaeology, when they go back and say, okay, that story that everyone says might be a myth or might be a little bit a game of telephone passes through time, some of the stories might be abbreviated or enhanced. How come archaeology seems to back up the real story of the Bible? And if you could kind of incorporate that with, I want you to believe and have faith, but I can also point to
also say it's actual, it's real, it's genuine. And you're right. The more they are getting at, Brian, faith and reason are not enemies. Faith and reason are allied, correct? It'd be a strange God whose best gift to us spiritually was faith and whose best gift to us naturally was reason, and had the two clashing. So faith and reason are very closely allied. So you are right. Science, evidence, history, archaeology kind of bolsters it.
You know who's talking about God more is Donald Trump, especially after his assassination attempt. He said, I think I was spared to save this country. How do you feel about him saying something like that?
He did. Now we got to think, Carly, God's doing that all the time with us. Sometimes it takes a real smack in the face to say, oh, I didn't notice that, but the Lord is with me.
Can I ask you a question topical about news that came out today? How do you feel about the death penalty?
Well, my gut, and when my gut talks, I better listen. My gut sort of sometimes, we get blasted. We get blasted because of the protection of the baby in the womb, okay? We're saying all life has dignity and deserves respect, no matter where it's at on the spectrum, and no matter what the person has or what the setting. All right? And would you say it again 4 years from now?
Absolutely.
That was a great night for you guys,
that was
right?
great.
That was good. Thanks for being there.
Yes.
Right.
Boy, oh boy, you guys were great. Yeah. And we're missing silverware, by the way. Be careful.
Stop it.
It was the best green room ever. The green room of Roger Goodell, Bob Kraft, Woody Johnson, John Mara. A lot of football players.
We get more football players than baseball because it's always a time of the World Series.
It was great to see you, Cardinal. Merry
Good to see you.
Christmas.
Blessed Christmas, folks. All right.
God bless you.
We'll be right back. Her 4 New York Times best-selling books and her amazing music. Is it 6?
Really give her tear, and she's still not shy.
Yeah, she has done it all, and we are so honored to have.
Not porn, that's the only thing.
Right. Although we do have some video. Could you check this out? No, I'm only kidding. I just want to make sure.
Who do I sue?
By the way, she has a wonderful song out called "Jesus Is His Name." So let's clean up this segment right now.
Yeah. That's an older one, but yeah.
But what about this? Herod and Mary.
Yeah.
Ancient Evil, Living Hope. Kathy
Just
Lee.
the ruins alone that are still there.
Good guy, bad guy.
Well, babies start out good. He wanted to make his father proud, and then he just did anything he could do to gain power, including murdering. I do the audio on this, and it took me 4 days to do it because there's nobody named Joe in it. I mean, thank God his first wife was named Doris. Everybody else is Aristobulus.
Yes.
Everyone Loves Raymond.
Isn't it amazing though? Because we just had Cardinal Dolan on, and Brian, you asked about archaeology and going back.
Yes.
To Israel and the real history of the time.
Yeah, well, we are very, very careful about being accurate. We know tons about Herod because of Josephus, the great, well-known and well-respected Jewish historian during the time. Mary, a little less, but there are great works about her that have withstood the test of Christian church time. And so we're very careful not to say that we made this up.
This would be a great gift.
Well, you still have some time,
yes.
and it'll live on. But the whole point of it is, my son said, "Mom, you love the great epic stories in the Bible. But the Bible, if you read it, and I read it at one point in my life 11 times straight, 11 years, something that Tyndall House has called the Bible in a year. And I was going to lose my mind. I said, I'm not learning anything new. That's when I started studying rabbinically. And you can look up what that is. It's basically you study what the scriptures were actually written in, the Hebrew and the Greek, and everything else is usually a bad translation of the Bible. So I just have to get to the point of, it's a new series. This is the first of hopefully many books. It's called Ancient Evil and Living Hope. Because don't people ask you guys all the time, do you think there's more evil in the world today you know. And I said, well, you'd think so, because people have cell phones and there's so many cable news shows, and you hear about it, and you see stuff on her that's instant, and you think, oh my gosh, what did they do? You know, they just set a woman on fire in the subway. Just, you know, now that would make the news. But anyway,
there's other good.
Well, listen. I said, you know what? The truth is, in Scripture, in Genesis, right there in the dawn of time, was the serpent. The evil was already there, and if you believe that stuff. And the good news is that evil is with us all the time, but the presence of God is what gives us hope, because it always outshines the darkness.
And we have hope, but sadly, we only have 10 seconds left.
Because you always leave me for last.
You kidding?
You saved the best for last. We saved the best for last.
You know what? That is such...